England, the 12th May 1817. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, every polished surface at Rivenhall Park reflected the same anxious preparation. Silver warming beneath linen, footmen rehearsing the order of doors, and Lady Hadleigh's voice cutting through the corridors as sharply as a bell. The Duke of Calderbrook was expected the following morning to meet the woman Sir Graham Hadleigh had already begun calling his future wife. Felicity Hadleigh sat alone in the small morning room with a chipped boxwood chess knight resting in her palm. It had belonged to her mother, part of a modest set worn smooth by years of quiet games. One ear of the knight had broken when Felicity was 12. Her mother had refused to replace it. "A damaged piece still has its own move," she had said. Felicity closed her fingers around it as carriage wheels sounded faintly beyond the south lawn. No one came to tell her who had arrived. No one had asked whether she wished to be presented as a bride. Outside, an unmarked hired carriage stopped short of the principal drive, where the trees concealed it from the front windows. Arthur Beresford, Duke of Calderbrook, stepped down wearing plain servant livery and carrying neither cane nor visible sign of rank. His valet, Mr. Dyer, followed with a travelling case. They entered through the service court, where Mr. Dawes, the butler, waited with a face disciplined into perfect neutrality. "Your Grace," he murmured. "Not here," Arthur replied. "Until tomorrow, I'm Mr. Reed. Only you and Dyer are to know." Mr. Dawes looked once at the plain coat, then at the Duke's expression. "Very good, sir." Arthur had come a day early because Sir Graham's letters were too smooth. They described Felicity as grateful, obedient, accomplished, and eager for the match. No woman of sense could be all for in precisely the manner a prospective husband wished to hear. Arthur had spent too many years watching diplomats rehearse sincerity to trust such perfection. He intended to see the household before it arranged itself for him. He did not expect to hear Felicity's future being priced before he had crossed the service passage. A woman's voice came through a half-open door ahead. "Hold still." Arthur stopped. Mr. Dawes began to speak, but Arthur raised one hand. Inside the adjoining dressing room, Lady Hadleigh fastened a necklace around Felicity's throat. The gold chain lay cold against her skin. 7 green stones caught the afternoon light, bright enough at a distance, dull enough to shame her at close range. "They're paste," Felicity said. Sir Graham stood near the mantel with a folded account in his hand. "They're what you'll say your mother left you." "My mother left emeralds." "Your mother's dead," Lady Hadleigh answered. "The distinction's of no use to her." Felicity's hand tightened around the chess knight hidden in her skirt pocket. "It's of use to me." Sir Graham crossed the room. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. "Tomorrow, the Duke will see the necklace. If he asks, you'll tell him your mother sold the original stones before her death. You'll say she was embarrassed by debts and wished the matter kept private. That's not true. Truth's a luxury for people who can pay their accounts." He lifted the folded paper. "Calderbrook's marriage settlement will cover the deficiency before Colfax or any other meddling solicitor examines the trust." Outside the door, Arthur went still. He had known Sir Graham pressed too eagerly for financial terms. He had not known the proposed marriage was meant to hide a theft. Lady Hadleigh adjusted the centre stone, her fingers neat and merciless. "You need only be agreeable. Men forgive almost anything in a pretty woman who knows when to be silent." Felicity met her aunt's eyes in the mirror, and if I refuse, Sir Graham smiled without warmth, "then I'll say you removed the emeralds yourself." "Who will society believe?" a baronet and trustee of long standing, or a dependent niece desperate to catch a duke. Felicity's face lost colour, but her spine remained straight. You'd accuse me of stealing my mother's jewels. I'd protect this family. You'd protect yourself. Silence followed. In the passage, Arthur felt anger sharpen into something colder. Sir Graham folded the account again. Mrs. Mercer leaves tonight if you keep up this performance. She'll have no reference, no pension, and no place in another respectable house. That threat struck where the others had not. Felicity's breath changed. Mrs. Mercer had nursed her mother through the final winter and stayed when every wealthier relation found grief inconvenient. Lady Hadleigh saw the hesitation and smiled. There, at last, a sensible consideration. Felicity looked down at the false stones. For one long moment, Arthur thought she might yield. Then she reached behind her neck, opened the clasp, and laid the necklace on the dressing table. I'd rather lose the Duke than call my mother a liar. Sir Graham's face hardened. You imagine dignity will feed Mrs. Mercer? No, I imagine your cruelty won't become less cruel because I obey it. Arthur had heard enough. He stepped back before anger drove him through the door. Mr. Dawes waited at the turn of the passage. Mrs. Mercer isn't to leave this house, Arthur said quietly. No servant or companion is to be dismissed before my formal arrival tomorrow. Use my authority if you must, but not my name unless there's no other choice. Mr. Dawes inclined his head. And Miss Hadleigh? Arthur looked toward the half-open door. No one's to place an account before her unwitnessed. Footsteps sounded inside. Arthur moved toward the servant's stair just as Felicity emerged. She had removed the necklace, but a faint red line marked where the chain had pressed against her throat. She saw the unfamiliar footman and stopped. For a second, neither spoke. Her gaze moved over his plain livery, his unbowed posture, and the eyes that met hers too directly. You're new, she said. Yes, miss. Lady Hadleigh doesn't permit new servants to wander. Then I've already disappointed her. The answer was too dry, too assured. Felicity's brows drew together. The chess knight slipped from her fingers and struck the carpet. Both bent to retrieve it. Their hands reached the piece at the same instant. His fingertips brushed hers. Warmth passed through the small contact, startling not because it was intimate, but because he withdrew at once and left the knight entirely within her reach. Most men in that house took first and explained later. This stranger did neither. Felicity lifted the chipped piece. You know what this is? A knight, he said, one that survived poor handling. Her eyes rose to his. Something almost like humor moved behind his restraint, but it did not soften the warning in his face. From the dressing room, Sir Graham called her name. Felicity turned. Before she could step away, the servant spoke so quietly that the words barely crossed the space between them. Don't sign any account placed before you tonight, Miss Hadleigh. She froze. Sir Graham had spoken of the account behind a closed door. No servant should have heard him. Felicity looked back, but Mr. Reed had already lowered his gaze. Every inch the respectful footman, except for the fact that he was standing as though the whole house might one day be required to answer to him. Felicity did not return to the dressing room at once. She stood in the passage, with the chipped chess knight pressed into her palm, and watched the unfamiliar footman disappear toward the servant's stair. His warning had been too precise to dismiss as overheard gossip. Sir Graham had mentioned the account only moments earlier, behind a door he believed private. Either Mr. Reed possessed extraordinarily sharp hearing, or someone had sent him to listen. Neither possibility brought comfort. Felicity, Sir Graham's second call carried less patience. She slipped the knight into her reticule and went back inside. The paste necklace remained on the dressing table where she had left it. Lady Hadleigh had begun refastening the lid of the jewel case with deliberate little movements. "You'll wear it at dinner," she said. "I won't. You mistake stubbornness for character, and you mistake obedience for innocence." Sir Graham placed the folded account inside his coat. "Enough, Mrs. Mercer leaves before supper." Felicity's breath caught, though she kept her face still. "You said tonight, I've reconsidered." He crossed to the bell pull. "A hired chaise can take her as far as St. Albans. After that, she may make whatever arrangements her age and reputation permit. She has served this family for 30 years. Then she has had ample time to save." Felicity stepped between him and the bell pull. "If you send her out without a reference, I'll tell the Duke everything the moment he arrives." Lady Hadleigh laughed softly. "And he'll believe a woman accused of stealing her own jewels." Sir Graham's fingers closed around the bell cord. Before he could pull it, Mr. Dawes appeared at the open door. The butler's expression was as composed as ever, but something in his posture had changed. He looked less like a servant awaiting instruction, and more like a man carrying one already given. "You rang, sir." "I was about to. Mrs. Mercer is to be dismissed immediately." Mr. Dawes inclined his head. "I'm afraid that won't be possible tonight." Sir Graham stared at him. "Explain yourself." "The hired chaise has developed a cracked wheel near the West Yard. No suitable carriage can be spared before morning. The roads are poor after last week's rain, and I won't send an elderly woman on foot." Lady Hadleigh's mouth tightened. "You won't?" "The household would bear responsibility if harm came to her." Mr. Dawes's tone remained perfectly respectful. "I have therefore instructed that her room remain prepared." Sir Graham took one step toward him. "Since when do you decide whom I dismiss?" "I decide whether an unsafe order can be carried out by the servants under my charge." For a moment, no one moved. Felicity studied the butler. Mr. Dawes had served at Rivenhall for 11 years. He had endured Sir Graham's temper, Lady Hadleigh's interference, and 3 separate reductions in staff without once openly opposing either of them. Yet now he stood firm over Mrs. Mercer's departure. Sir Graham's face darkened. "We'll discuss this in my study." "Of course, sir." Mr. Dawes turned to Felicity before leaving. "Mrs. Mercer is in her room, miss." "She has not packed." Relief came so sharply that Felicity had to steady herself against the dressing table. Lady Hadleigh noticed. "Don't look so grateful. A broken wheel isn't providence." No, Felicity thought. It was not. It was intervention. By 5:30, she found Mr. Reed near the lower corridor, carrying a tray of clean glasses toward the butler's pantry. He saw her coming and shifted to one side, leaving the passage clear. The courtesy was small, but she noticed it because too many men at Rivenhall expected her to make room for them. "Mrs. Mercer is still here," she said, "so I understand. The carriage wheel isn't cracked." He glanced at the tray. "I haven't inspected it. Mr. Dawes has never contradicted my uncle in 11 years. Perhaps he chose an excellent day to begin." Felicity lowered her voice. "What did you say to him?" "Very little. You knew about the account. You knew Mrs. Mercer was being threatened. Now the butler is risking his position." Mr. Reed's gaze met hers. His eyes were grey, steady, and entirely without the nervous deference expected of a new footman. "I heard enough to know you're being coerced. That isn't an answer. It's the answer I can give." "Who are you?" The faintest pause followed. "Today, I'm Mr. Reed." The phrasing unsettled her more than a lie would have done. Felicity looked toward the servant's stair to be certain they were alone. If you truly wish to help, you won't search Lady Hadleigh's room. You won't take the necklace, and you won't ask another servant to do either. One brow lifted. You assume I intended theft. I assume men who believe themselves useful often decide the rules no longer apply to them. Something almost approving entered his expression. And why shouldn't the necklace be taken if it proves what they've done? Because stealing false stones won't reveal where the real ones went. It will only let Sir Graham say I arranged the theft. Then what would you do? Find someone who remembers the original setting. Trace who handled the jewels. Secure the trust inventory before my uncle alters it. She stopped, annoyed that she had said so much to a stranger. But I won't prove one theft by committing another, mister. Reed studied her for a long moment. No, I don't suppose you would. Footsteps approached from the pantry. Felicity stepped aside. He moved as well, giving her the wider path without forcing her near the wall. You should return to your duties, she said, and you should avoid signing accounts. You've said that, you haven't promised. Felicity held his gaze. I won't sign anything tonight. The answer seemed to ease some tension in his shoulders. Good. At dinner, Arthur stood behind Lady Hadleigh's chair and learned more in 20 minutes than Sir Graham's correspondence had revealed in 6 months. Lady Hadleigh spoke of Felicity as though she were a portrait being offered for sale. She praised her music, her French, and her quiet habits. Felicity answered only when directly addressed. Mrs. Mercer's place among the upper servants remained secure for the night, though Arthur had seen Sir Graham summon Mr. Dawes to the study, and emerge 10 minutes later, looking furious. Before that confrontation, Arthur had shown the butler the ducal signet concealed inside his waistcoat. Mr. Dawes had examined it once, then bowed. No further explanation had been required. The dinner guests included Miss Frances Ludlow, a fair-haired young woman with polished manners, and an instinct for every shift in social advantage. Lady Hadleigh placed her opposite Felicity. Miss Ludlow has just returned from Bath, she told the table. Everyone says she was much admired. Frances smiled. Admiration is easy to win when nothing serious is expected of one. Her eyes slid toward Felicity. A future Duchess must face greater scrutiny. Felicity lifted her wineglass. Then I'm fortunate not to be one yet. Arthur nearly smiled. Lady Hadleigh did not. She wore the emerald spray brooch high against dark silk, where 7 stones gleamed beneath the candles. Arthur watched the center emerald as she turned her head. A pale crescent lay within it, small as the edge of a fingernail. Earlier, through the dressing-room door, he had heard Felicity tell Mrs. Mercer that her mother's center stone carried a moon-shaped mark near its heart. The brooch was no proof, but it was no coincidence. During the second course, Sir Graham withdrew a folded paper from his coat. He checked a line beneath the table, glanced toward Felicity, then returned it to his pocket. Later, when the ladies left for the drawing-room, Arthur carried a tray past the study and saw Sir Graham place that same folded document inside a narrow iron box. For one instant before the lid closed, Arthur read the heading, Inventory of the Separate Property of the late Lady Thomas Hadleigh. Sir Graham turned the key. Arthur lowered his eyes and continued walking. Outside, wheels rolled over the gravel. Every servant in the corridor straightened as the ducal carriage swept beneath the portico in full livery. Arthur stood among them in a footman's plain coat, while Lady Joan Beresford descended, bringing with her the formal household of a duke, who, according to every person at Rivenhall Park, had not yet arrived. At 9:30 the next morning, Felicity entered the drawing room, prepared to apologize for an offence no one had yet named. Lady Hadleigh had ordered her into a pale blue gown, chosen because it made her look composed rather than memorable. Sir Graham stood near the fireplace with one hand resting on the mantel, while Frances Ludlow occupied the chair nearest the window, as though she had been placed there for comparison. Lady Joan Beresford sat beside the tea-table, silver-haired, erect, and observant. The only person missing was the Duke of Calderbrook. "You'll explain the confusion over Mrs. Mercer," Lady Hadleigh murmured as Felicity crossed the carpet. "You'll assure His Grace that emotional attachment led you to interfere in household discipline." Felicity stopped beside the sofa. "I didn't interfere. You threatened your uncle after he threatened an old woman." Sir Graham's expression sharpened. "You'll remember where you are." The door opened before Felicity could answer. Mr. Dawes announced, "His Grace, the Duke of Calderbrook." Arthur Beresford entered in a dark morning coat cut with severe elegance, a white cravat, and the controlled assurance of a man who had never needed to ask a room to make space for him. Mr. Reed's plain livery was gone. So was the lowered gaze, yet the voice, when he thanked Mr. Dawes, was unmistakable. Felicity felt the floor tilt beneath her. He had heard everything. He had warned her. He had looked into her face while allowing her to believe he was a servant. Arthur's eyes found hers at once. Recognition passed between them, followed by something harder to name. Regret, perhaps, not shame. Not yet. Lady Hadleigh rose with a brilliant smile. "Your Grace, what a delightful surprise. We understood you had only just arrived." "My household arrived last evening," Arthur said. "I was already here." Silence touched the room. Sir Graham recovered first. "You were here?" "I wished to see Rivenhall before it was arranged for my benefit." Arthur moved toward Lady Joan and bowed over her hand. "My aunt was kind enough to support the deception." Lady Joan gave him a dry look. "Support is a generous word. I agreed not to expose you before breakfast." Lady Hadleigh's face remained pleasant through effort. How very unconventional. It was. Arthur turned to Felicity. "Miss Hadleigh." She made the proper curtsy, because habit held even when trust did not. When she rose, he offered his hand. The gesture was formal, not intimate. Yet he did not close the distance or presume upon her. Felicity hesitated. Every eye in the room rested upon them. She placed only her fingertips in his palm. His hand was warm and steady. He released her before the contact could become a claim. "Your Grace," she said. The title sounded colder than she intended. Lady Hadleigh seized the pause. "Felicity has been distressed by a trivial household matter." She wished to apologize for allowing sentiment to overcome judgment. Arthur looked at Felicity, not her aunt. "Do you wish to apologize?" "No." The word left her before prudence could soften it. Frances stared. Sir Graham stepped forward. "My niece means that she regrets the manner in which she spoke." "I regret that speaking plainly was necessary," Felicity said. Arthur's mouth almost curved. "Then no apology is required." Lady Hadleigh's smile vanished. "Your Grace cannot know the full circumstances. I know, Mrs. Mercer was to be dismissed without a reference and sent on to wet roads in an unsafe chaise." Sir Graham's colour changed. A servant misunderstood a private discussion. No servant misunderstood it. Arthur's tone remained quiet, and Mrs. Mercer will remain at Rivenhall until Miss Hadleigh chooses otherwise. Relief came with unease. He was protecting her, but also issuing commands in her name. Arthur seemed to read her face. "With your permission," he added. Felicity held his gaze. Mrs. Mercer may stay. Then she stays. Sir Graham drew himself upright. This is my house. And she is Miss Hadleigh's companion. Arthur did not raise his voice. He did not need to. There is another matter. No engagement will be announced today, tomorrow, or at any time unless Miss Hadleigh gives her free consent, in terms no one else has prepared for her. Frances lowered her eyes to hide disappointment. Lady Hadleigh looked as though the air had been struck from her. Sir Graham said, "Your Grace, our correspondence established an understanding. Our correspondence established that you wished for one." Arthur's gaze moved to Felicity. It did not establish that she did. For the first time in years, a man had asked whether her silence meant agreement. It did not erase the livery or the listening. Lady Joan set down her cup. Perhaps Miss Hadleigh and my nephew should speak without an audience determined to answer for them. 10 minutes later, Felicity sat in the smaller morning room with Lady Joan near the open door, Arthur opposite her. Sunlight lay across the chess table between them. The board was empty. Felicity kept both hands folded in her lap. Arthur did not attempt charm. "You have every right to be angry. That's convenient, now that you're no longer dressed as a footman. It is not meant to be convenient. You watched me without my knowledge. Yes, you listened outside a door. Yes. Why? Sir Graham's letters described a woman so perfectly suited to my expectations that she did not sound alive. Grateful, obedient, accomplished, eager to please. I have spent too many years among men who rehearse truth before presenting it. I suspected someone was arranging you for inspection. So you inspected me first. Yes, you suspected I was being controlled, and your remedy was to deceive me. It was. Do you call that honorable? No. The answer came at once. Felicity looked toward Lady Joan, but the older woman remained silent. Arthur continued. I learned enough to stop an announcement and prevent Mrs. Mercer's dismissal. I also learned that my method cost me any claim to your trust. Both things are true. Felicity's anger loosened by 1 degree. Then don't expect gratitude to become an engagement. I don't. And don't imagine that because you heard my uncle threaten me, you now own the problem. I don't own anything that belongs to you. His gaze dropped briefly to her empty hands, including your answer. Felicity studied him. The necklace belonged to my mother. The gold chain is original. So is the clasp. It was repaired after it caught on a shawl when I was 14. And the stones? 7 emeralds. 6 matched ovals and 1 larger center stone. She paused. There was a pale crescent inside the center emerald, not on the surface. Within it, Arthur's expression sharpened. Lady Hadleigh wore an emerald brooch last night. Felicity went still. What kind? A spray. 7 stones. Did the center stone have the mark? I saw something like it. I cannot claim more. She appreciated the restraint, despite herself. If it's my mother's stone, then the others may be hers too. Possibly. You mustn't take the brooch. I know. Do you? Felicity leaned forward. You entered this house under another name because you believed deception justified the result. Arthur's face changed, not with anger, but with the impact of being accurately seen. Then tell me what you require. No announcement, no seizure by rank, no accusation until the jewels and records can be secured by someone independent of both families. Agreed. And no decision made for me because you think it kinder. A longer silence followed. Agreed, he said again. Felicity rose. This time Arthur did not offer his hand. He waited to see whether she wanted it. She noticed. At the door he said, There will be no bargain between us, Miss Hadleigh. She looked back. There already was. My uncle simply forgot to ask whether I accepted it. Arthur held her gaze. Then we begin again. No engagement, no bargain, and no assumption that you owe me an answer. By mid-afternoon, the rain had cleared from the long windows of Rivenhall Park, leaving the lawns bright beneath a pale May sun. Felicity returned to the small morning room because Lady Joan had sent a message asking whether she would speak with the Duke again. This time, there was no audience of relatives waiting to correct her. Lady Joan sat near the open door with a basket of correspondence on her lap, close enough to satisfy propriety and far enough to leave the conversation its dignity. Arthur stood beside the empty chess table. He did not sit until Felicity had chosen her chair. The consideration should not have mattered. It did. "My aunt tells me you wish to understand the trust," Felicity said. "I wish to understand only what you're willing to explain." "That's a careful answer. I'm attempting to improve." The faint dryness in his voice nearly drew a smile from her, but memory of the servant's coat held it back. She placed her reticule beside her and folded her hands. "My mother's marriage settlement listed certain jewels as her separate property. The emerald necklace was among them. After her death, the stones were held in trust for me. By Sir Graham. By my father first, then by my uncle after my father died. Sir Graham is the surviving trustee and custodian. He is not the owner." Arthur's expression sharpened. "And you're of age. I am 29, not a ward. My uncle cannot choose my husband by law, but he can make refusal costly. He controls the household in which I live. He releases my allowance. He decides which letters reach me, which servants remain, and whether society hears that I am dutiful or unstable." She spoke without drama. The plainness made the truth heavier. Legal freedom is a thin comfort when every ordinary necessity passes through one man's hand. Arthur glanced toward Lady Joan, who continued sorting letters without appearing to listen. "Does the settlement permit him to alter the jewels?" "It permits reasonable care and repair. It does not permit him to replace the stones, sell them, or use them as security for his own debts. Then the brooch may be more than an insult. It may be evidence. It may also be a resemblance. We cannot accuse Lady Hadleigh because a stone looked familiar by candlelight." "Agreed." Felicity watched him closely. "You agree quickly. Would you prefer resistance? I'd prefer to know whether agreement means you intend to do something else." Arthur accepted the rebuke without looking away. "Then tell me the terms under which I may help." Felicity opened her reticule and removed the chipped boxwood knight. She set it on the empty board between them. One damaged ear gave the piece a stubborn, almost comic dignity. "First, you will not seize the brooch because you are a duke. I won't. Second, there will be no announcement of an engagement. There won't. Third, you will not use my name in any plan without my knowledge and consent." The pause was brief, but she saw it. Strategy lived too naturally in him. "Agreed," he said. "Fourth, no accusation will be made until the necklace, the trust inventory, and any other evidence can be placed with someone independent of my uncle and of you. Mr. Colfax, if he can be reached without Sir Graham intercepting the letter." Arthur looked at the chess knight. "You have considered this carefully. Women without authority often become careful. It is the only power no one notices until too late." "I have noticed." The words were quiet. They carried no compliment polished for courtship, only recognition. Felicity felt the space between them alter. She touched the chipped ear of the knight. "My mother used to leave this piece outside the board." Arthur sat opposite her, a protest against the rules, a reminder that one need not remain where another person has placed one. A dangerous philosophy for a future Duchess. I am not a future Duchess. No, he said. You are a woman who has just made a Duke promise not to behave like one. This time the smile escaped her. It was small and unwilling, but real. Arthur's answering expression held warmth rather than triumph. I have negotiated with ambassadors who asked less, he added. Perhaps they had less reason to distrust you. Undoubtedly. The humor faded as Felicity looked down at the knight. Do you understand why the rules matter? Because Sir Graham has made your future a bargain. That is only part of it. She drew a slow breath. Every person in this house speaks as though marriage to you would solve the wrong done to me. It would not. A different powerful man deciding what is best would still leave me without a choice. Arthur's face became very still. You think I might become that man? I think you arrived under a false name, because you believed your purpose excused the deception. That was true. Then I would be foolish not to consider what else you might excuse. No anger rose in him. Instead, he looked toward the rain-washed windows and then back to her. My mother lived in a house where every command was called concern. I believed I had learned from watching it. Perhaps you learned to recognize control only when another man used it. The observation landed between them. Lady Joan's papers rustled softly near the door. Arthur lowered his gaze to Felicity's hands. Her right hand had tightened around the edge of her glove until the kid leather creased across her knuckles. You're hurting your hand, he said. Felicity released her grip at once. I'm not injured. I did not say you were. He rested his own hand on the table, palm turned slightly upward, but not extended across the space. May I? She knew what he asked. The question was simple. The waiting was not. Sir Graham would have taken her wrist and called it guidance. Lady Hadleigh would have adjusted her fingers and called it presentation. Arthur did neither. Felicity placed the chess knight aside. Then she gave him her gloved hand. His fingers closed with careful warmth around hers, firm enough to steady, gentle enough to release without effort. He did not examine her as though she were fragile. He simply held her hand until the tension left her knuckles. The contact lasted only several breaths, yet it felt more intimate than the formal touch before the drawing room, because this one had been asked for and freely given. Arthur's thumb remained still against the seam of her glove. I cannot promise never to make a mistake, he said. I can promise not to call it protection when you have named it otherwise. Felicity searched his face. And if the evidence threatens your reputation as well as mine, then my reputation will have to survive the truth. She withdrew her hand. He released her immediately. The warmth remained after the touch was gone. Lady Joan looked up from her letters as though she had noticed nothing. A maid entered carrying a folded message on a silver salver. For Miss Hadleigh, my lady. Felicity broke Lady Hadleigh's seal. The note contained a single elegant command. The family emeralds would be displayed at Saturday's musicale, and Felicity would wear them before the assembled county. Arthur read the change in her face. What is it? She handed him the note. He read it once. She means to force the appearance of innocence before anyone can question the stones. And if I refuse, she'll say refusal proves guilt. Felicity looked at the chipped knight, standing alone beside the empty board. Then we have until Saturday. Arthur folded the note and returned it to her rather than keeping it. Tell me where you want me. Felicity met his eyes. For now, Your Grace, exactly where I can see you. The following morning, Felicity found Arthur waiting in the orangery with Lady Joan, seated at the far end beside an open basket of embroidery. Sunlight filtered through the glass roof and warmed the damp stone beneath rows of lemon trees. The air smelled faintly of earth and bitter leaves. Arthur had chosen a place where every movement could be seen, and Felicity understood the choice was deliberate. "You asked where I wanted you," she said as she approached. "I remember. Most men remember instructions only until they become inconvenient. Then I must hope convenience does not become too persuasive before luncheon." The dryness of his answer softened something in her, despite herself. She held the chipped boxwood knight inside her reticule, her thumb resting over the damaged ear. Arthur glanced toward the path ahead. "Would you walk with me?" Felicity looked at Lady Joan, who raised one silver brow without lifting her needle. "I can see the entire path," she said. "Your reputations are safe from everything except poor conversation." Arthur offered Felicity his arm. She did not take it immediately. His hand remained still, without impatience. "Only for the step," she said. "I shall attempt not to become vain." She placed her gloved fingers lightly on his sleeve as they crossed the shallow stone rise into the central aisle. Once the ground leveled, she released him. He made no effort to retain her hand. That restraint remained with her longer than the contact. They walked side by side beneath the pale green branches. "You said yesterday that you had spent years among men who rehearsed truth," Felicity said. "Diplomats?" "Some of them called themselves that, and the others, their governments called them useful." She glanced at him. "That sounds like an answer designed to reveal nothing." "It reveals that I learned caution from men who smiled while concealing troop movements." "And did you conceal troop movements?" "No, I concealed which men had already betrayed them." The humor left his face, though his voice remained even. "During the final years of the war, I assisted in negotiations where the arrangement of a dinner table could carry more information than a letter." A seat changed. A phrase repeated too loudly. One man leaving a room before another. Small movements exposed loyalties. "You became skilled at moving people without touching them." "Yes." The admission came too readily to be flattering, and at deciding which person could be used to influence another. Arthur looked through the glass toward the grey line of distant trees. "Yes." Felicity felt the chess knight beneath her hand. "Did you ever forget that the pieces were human beings?" He turned his gaze back to her. "More than once." She had expected defense. The answer unsettled her more. "At least you're honest." "I have discovered that you make dishonesty unusually uncomfortable." "I had hoped it was impossible in my presence." "That would be a dangerous power. Half of Parliament would refuse your invitations." The image came so unexpectedly that Felicity laughed. It was not the careful sound she used in drawing rooms when courtesy demanded pleasure. The laugh escaped before she could restrain it, warm and brief beneath the glass. Arthur stopped walking. He did not smile broadly. His expression gentled, as though he had been given something he had not expected and did not wish to frighten away. Felicity became aware of the silence and looked ahead. "You needn't appear so astonished." "I was beginning to think Rivenhall had forbidden laughter along with independent correspondence." "Only mine." "Then I shall consider this an act of rebellion." They resumed walking. The lightness did not erase what stood between them, but it made room for something besides suspicion. At the end of the aisle, a young housemaid entered, carrying a tray of clean glasses. Her shoe caught on the uneven threshold. The tray tilted. 2 glasses struck the stone and shattered. The girl froze. Lady Hadleigh's voice came from the open door behind her. "What have you done?" The maid's face drained of colour. "I'm sorry, my lady. The step caught me. The step has been there longer than you have." Lady Hadleigh crossed the threshold, anger sharpening each word. "You'll pay for them from your wages." Felicity moved before Arthur could speak. "The stone is loose." She crouched near the threshold, careful not to touch the broken glass. "I warned Mr. Dawes of it last month." Lady Hadleigh stared at her. "This does not concern you." "It concerns anyone expected to walk safely through the door." Felicity looked at the maid. "Fetch a brush and pan. Do not use your hands." The girl bobbed a curtsy and fled. "You encourage carelessness," Lady Hadleigh said. "No, I discourage punishing a servant for a repair the household neglected." Lady Hadleigh's attention shifted to Arthur. "Your Grace, you see how sentiment has confused her judgment." Arthur's gaze rested on the cracked edge of stone. "I see a threshold that should have been repaired." Lady Hadleigh's lips thinned. "Naturally, Miss Hadleigh has persuaded you." "The floor persuaded me." Felicity hid another smile. Lady Hadleigh left without replying, her skirts snapping around the doorframe. When the maid returned, Arthur stood aside while Felicity helped direct the clearing of the glass. He did not turn the moment into praise. He simply ordered a footman to place a chair before the loose stone until Mr. Dawes could have it repaired. Once the maid was gone, Felicity said, "You could have defended her first. You did not need me to." The answer carried no resentment. "I am learning to distinguish between standing with someone and taking their sentence from them." The words were not polished. Felicity believed them because they sounded unfinished. Later that afternoon, she sat at the escritoire in the small morning room with Lady Joan near the window, and Arthur across the room, deliberately occupied with a newspaper he was not reading. Felicity addressed the letter herself. "Mr. Elias Sloane, Goldsmith, Ludgate Hill, London." She described the repaired clasp, the 7 emeralds, and the crescent-shaped inclusion within the center stone. She did not accuse anyone. She asked only whether he remembered the necklace, and whether any later work had been commissioned involving those stones. When she finished, she sanded the page, folded it, and sealed it with plain red wax. Arthur rose only after she had done so. "Would you like me to send a rider?" "No." "Because he would be mine?" "Because Sir Graham would say the inquiry was bought by ducal influence before it began." Arthur nodded. "Then how?" Felicity rang for Mr. Dawes. When the butler arrived, she handed him the sealed letter. "Please enter this in the outgoing post book and send it with the household letters this afternoon." "Certainly, miss." Mr. Dawes examined the seal without touching it unnecessarily. "I shall record the time as well." "Thank you." Arthur said nothing until the door closed. "You trust him?" "I trust that he has begun choosing his conscience over convenience." "A rare household. Quality." "You are very severe toward households for a man who owns several." "Ownership provides abundant evidence." Felicity looked down to hide the smile threatening again. Her hand moved instinctively to the reticule beside her chair. Arthur noticed. "The knight," he said. "You reach for it when you expect something to be taken." Felicity stilled. "You observe too much. I am trying not to use what I observe against you." "That is not the same as asking permission." He inclined his head. "May I ask why you carry it?" "Not yet." "Then I shall wait." His willingness to leave the question unanswered touched her more than insistence would have done. At dinner, Frances Ludlow wore pale gold and spoke brightly of the musicale planned for Saturday. Lady Hadleigh's emerald spray brooch shone at her throat, its 7 stones catching candlelight with a depth the paste necklace could never imitate. Frances turned to Felicity. One hopes the family jewels will bear examination. A future Duchess cannot afford doubtful ornaments. Conversation faded around the table. Felicity set down her spoon. Doubt belongs to the person who altered them, Miss Ludlow, not to the woman expected to wear them. Francis's smile faltered. Across the table, Arthur did not intervene. He only met Felicity's eyes, and the quiet approval there felt more intimate than public rescue. Before the next course arrived, Mr. Dawes appeared at Arthur's shoulder and bent to speak in a low voice. Arthur's expression changed. Felicity saw it at once. After dinner, he found her near the drawing-room door. "Your letter is safe," he said. "Why would it not be?" Someone went to the servants' hall and asked for the outgoing packet before it left. They claimed Lady Hadleigh wished to add a note. Felicity's hand closed around her reticule. Who? Mr. Dawes saw only her maid. The packet had already been entered and placed in his locked dispatch box. Did they take anything? No. Arthur's gaze moved toward Lady Hadleigh, who was laughing beneath the emerald brooch. But now we know they are afraid of what Mr. Sloane may remember. The reply from Mr. Sloane arrived shortly after breakfast on the 16th of May, folded beneath a plain outer cover, and entered in Mr. Dawes's outgoing and incoming postbook before it reached Felicity's hand. She broke the seal in the small morning room, while Lady Joan sat near the open door with her embroidery, and Arthur stood by the window, close enough to hear if invited, and far enough to make refusal possible. The goldsmith's hand was precise, the letters narrow and dark. He remembered the necklace. He remembered repairing the clasp after it had caught on a shawl. He also remembered the center emerald because of a pale, crescent-shaped inclusion within the stone. He could not identify any later setting without seeing the jewels in person. But he would come to Hertfordshire within a week if requested. Felicity read the final line twice. Until that moment, memory had been her only defense. Now another person remembered. He confirms the clasp, she said, and the mark. Arthur did not move from the window. Does he mention the brooch? No, he hasn't seen it. She folded the letter along its original crease. He says he can examine both objects if they're placed before him. Then we need lawful access to both. We need custody first. Mr. Colfax can hold them. If Sir Graham agrees. Arthur's expression suggested what he thought of that possibility, but he kept the judgment from his voice. Then we must give him a reason he cannot refuse without appearing afraid. Felicity glanced up. That sounds like strategy. It is. You promised no action without my knowledge. I remember, and without my consent. I remember that as well. The assurance should have been enough, yet the discovery that someone had tried to intercept her first letter had left every promise feeling vulnerable. She placed Mr. Sloane's reply beside her reticule and touched the chipped boxwood knight through the fabric. Arthur noticed. He did not ask immediately. The restraint invited truth more effectively than pressure would have done. Felicity drew the piece out and set it on the table. My mother gave me this during her final illness. Lady Joan's needle paused once, then resumed. Arthur came no closer. Was it part of her own set? Yes, she carried the set from one house to another for most of her married life. My father's estate. His sister's house during repairs. Sir Graham's London rooms when money became tight. Then Rivenhall after my father died. Felicity turned the knight between her fingers. Every move was decided by a man explaining what was best. She was always told where she would live, whom she would receive, which expenses were necessary, which friendships were unsuitable. By the end, obedience had been praised so often that no one remembered she had ever possessed wishes. Arthur's face had gone still, except you. I remembered too late. You were her daughter, not her jailer. I was old enough to see she was unhappy. Seeing unhappiness does not always give a person the power to end it. No, but it can teach one how easily helplessness becomes a habit. Felicity looked at the night. She used to keep this piece outside the board, she said. It reminded her that a position assigned was not the same as a position chosen. Arthur left the window and took the chair opposite her, though he did not reach for the piece. My mother would have understood her. Felicity lifted her eyes. He had spoken of his mother before, but only in outline. Now something unguarded entered his voice. My father called every command concern, he continued, where she went, what she wore, which letters were answered, which griefs were convenient. He believed order proved devotion. And did she? At first, perhaps. Later, she stopped arguing because argument changed nothing. Arthur looked toward the rain-bright lawn beyond the windows. I was young enough to hate him and old enough to imitate him. I learned to prevent disorder before it reached me. I learned to arrange outcomes, place people where they would be safest, and call the arrangement prudence. Felicity heard the admission beneath the polished words, strategy as protection. Yes, and protection as command. He met her gaze. Sometimes. The answer settled heavily between them. Felicity's fingers tightened around the night. Then you. Understand why your disguise frightened me after it helped me. I do. You decided the truth required a method I had not chosen. Yes, and if you believe a different method will recover the emeralds, what stops you from choosing it again? Arthur opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, no dry answer arrived to rescue him. Lady Joan's embroidery thread whispered through linen near the door. Outside, a gardener's barrow rolled faintly over gravel. Arthur finally said, "Nothing stops me except the decision to ask." Felicity's grip tightened further. The chipped edge pressed into her palm. Arthur looked down. "You're hurting your hand." "It's nothing. May I disagree without taking it from you?" The question caught her off guard. She released the knight and flexed her fingers. A pale mark crossed her skin. Arthur rested his hand on the table between them, palm upward. He did not extend it into her space. He simply left it there. "You don't have to," he said. Felicity looked at his open hand. It was a strange thing to be offered by a man whose title could command rooms, servants, tenants, and invitations. Stranger still, that he waited as though her smallest choice mattered. She placed her hand in his. Arthur's fingers closed slowly. Only after hers had settled, the warmth of his palm eased the pressure from her knuckles. He did not examine the mark or turn her hand over. He held it as if reassurance, not possession, was the whole purpose. Felicity felt her breathing change. The room remained entirely proper. Lady Joan sat within sight. The door stood open, yet the moment seemed more private than any secret corridor, because neither of them was pretending. "My mother used to say, silence could keep a household peaceful," Arthur said. "She never said what it cost her." Felicity's thumb rested lightly against the side of his hand. Mine said peace purchased with fear was only quiet. She was right. They both were. Arthur's hold remained steady. "I cannot promise instinct will never carry me toward control. I can promise I'll tell you when I have a plan. I'll ask before your name enters it. If you refuse, I will not call the refusal unreasonable simply because it inconveniences me." Felicity studied him. "That is a difficult promise for a strategist. You are a difficult woman to deceive twice." A faint smile touched her mouth. That wasn't an apology. No, It was admiration. The warmth in his voice passed through her more deeply than the contact itself. She did not withdraw for several quiet moments. They remained hand in hand over the empty chessboard, the chipped knight standing beside them. There was no declaration, no courtship, and no promise beyond the one he had just made. Still, Felicity understood that trust sometimes began not with certainty, but with a person choosing not to close his hand until invited. A shadow crossed the doorway. Lady Hadleigh's maid stood there, breathless and pale. She looked first at their joined hands, then quickly away. "Miss Hadleigh, my lady requires you upstairs." Felicity released Arthur. He opened his fingers at once. "For what purpose?" she asked. "The musical has been moved forward, miss." "The guests are expected tomorrow evening." Felicity rose. "It was planned for Saturday. Lady Hadleigh says waiting would be unwise." The maid swallowed. "She has ordered the emerald necklace prepared, and she says she'll place it around your neck herself." Arthur stood, all warmth gone from his expression. Felicity took Mr. Sloane's letter, returned the chess knight to her reticule, and faced the door. The villains had learned that someone remembered the stones. They were no longer preparing a display. They were preparing an accusation. By 7 the following evening, the music room at Rivenhall Park glittered with candlelight, polished glass, and the expectation of scandal disguised as hospitality. Lady Hadleigh had invited half the county on less than a day's notice. No one admitted curiosity, but every carriage had arrived early. Felicity stood before the long mirror in her dressing room, while Lady Hadleigh fastened the necklace at her throat. The original gold chain lay cold against her skin. 7 green stones rested above the blue silk of her gown, bright enough to deceive across a room and dull enough to betray themselves at close range. "Hold still," Lady Hadleigh said. Her fingers lingered at the repaired clasp. Felicity felt a small tug, then the faintest easing of pressure. "You loosened it." Lady Hadleigh met her eyes in the mirror. "Don't be absurd. The clasp sat firmly yesterday. Then, perhaps, nervousness has made you an expert in jewellery." Felicity looked at the emerald spray brooch pinned high against her aunt's dark gown. The centre stone caught the candle flame. Deep within the green, a pale crescent seemed to float like a sliver of moon beneath water. Her mother's stone. She felt certainty before proof. "You intend the necklace to fall," Felicity said. Lady Hadleigh's expression did not change. "I intend you to smile, and when the stones are seen for what they are, then society will learn what kind of woman the Duke nearly chose." The cruelty was so calm that Felicity's fear sharpened into clarity. She touched the chipped boxwood knight inside her reticule. Arthur had promised no action without her knowledge. Mr. Colfax, summoned quietly by Lady Joan, waited among the guests as an independent solicitor. Mr. Sloane had not yet arrived. The evidence was incomplete. The trap was not. Lady Hadleigh stepped back. "You may go down." Felicity descended alone. The musicale had begun with a young lady at the pianoforte, though few people listened. Sir Graham stood near the mantel, speaking to 2 neighbouring landowners. Francis Ludlow, dressed in ivory satin, held court beside the refreshments. Arthur remained near Lady Joan, his attention fixed on Felicity from the moment she entered. He did not cross the room. He waited, as she had asked, exactly where she could see him. That restraint steadied her more than an immediate rescue would have done. She took her place beside the piano. A soprano began an Italian air. During the first verse, Felicity felt the clasp shift. She kept her shoulders still. During the second, Francis approached with a smile polished to innocence. What a magnificent necklace. Miss Hadleigh. Several conversations quieted. Felicity heard the danger beneath the compliment. It belonged to my mother. How fortunate. Frances leaned closer, allowing the guests beside her to hear. One hopes the family emeralds are equal to the expectations of a duchess. Arthur's gaze hardened. Felicity answered before he could move. One hopes a woman is judged by more than the value placed around her neck. Frances's smile thinned. Of course, though imitation stones would make an unfortunate impression. The clasp opened, the necklace slipped. 6 green stones scattered across the polished floor with small, hard clicks. The center stone struck the edge of a chair leg and broke into 2 bright fragments. The music stopped. Silence spread outward from Felicity until even the candles seemed to hold still. A gentleman near the front bent instinctively, then halted when Arthur said, "Do not touch them." Sir Graham crossed the room. "Felicity, what have you done?" "Nothing." Lady Hadleigh pressed one hand to her breast with perfect horror. "They are paste." Frances crouched without touching the fragments. "I believe they are." A murmur moved through the guests. Sir Graham seized the opening. "I had hoped never to expose this family disgrace." Felicity turned to him. "What disgrace?" "Your mother's jewels were entrusted to you." His voice carried clearly. "We concealed the loss out of compassion." "You concealed the substitution. You sold the emeralds." The accusation landed with calculated force. Lady Hadleigh lowered her eyes. "We begged her to tell the truth before His Grace arrived." "That is a lie," Felicity said. "Is it?" Frances asked softly. "Then perhaps the Duke should explain why he entered this house dressed as a servant and met with you in secret." Shock rippled through the room. Arthur stepped forward. "Miss Hadleigh did not know who I was." Frances looked at him. "But you were here." "I was, in livery, by my own decision." His voice was controlled, but every person in the room heard the authority beneath it. No blame for that deception belongs to Miss Hadleigh. Sir Graham moved toward the fallen chain. "This family matter requires privacy." Arthur placed himself between him and the evidence. "It requires witnesses." "You have no right to interfere with my niece's property. You have just accused her of stealing it." Arthur looked to Felicity. "How do you wish the pieces secured?" The question returned the room to her, not his command. Her choice. Felicity drew one breath. "Mr. Colfax." The solicitor came forward from beside Lady Joan. He carried a flat velvet tray and several folded papers. "At your service, Miss Hadleigh." Felicity pointed carefully. "There are 6 intact paste stones, 2 fragments from the center stone, the original gold chain, and the repaired clasp." "Mr." Colfax repeated each item as he lifted it with a small pair of silver tongs. Lady Joan counted aloud. Mr. Dawes confirmed the count. Sir Graham objected, but Felicity did not look at him. "Seal them together," she said, in the presence of everyone who heard the accusation. Mr. Colfax folded the velvet over the objects, placed them in a document packet, and applied wax. Felicity pressed no family seal upon it. Neither did Arthur. Mr. Colfax used his professional seal, then asked Lady Joan, Mr. Dawes, Sir Graham, and Felicity to witness the inscription. Sir Graham signed only after Arthur said, "Refusal will be remembered." Lady Hadleigh's emerald brooch flashed as she shifted. Felicity saw the pale crescent again. Arthur followed her gaze. Understanding passed between them. "Not proof, not yet." Arthur turned to the room. "The musicale is concluded." Felicity faced him. "No." His attention returned to her. "Miss Hadleigh, you may dismiss your own household, Your Grace. This is not yours." The room went still again. They came to see whether I would become a duchess. They may remain long enough to hear that I did not sell my mother's stones." Sir Graham said, "You will leave now." Felicity looked at him. "I will leave when I choose." Then she faced the assembled guests. Her hands were cold, but her voice did not tremble. "I did not replace those emeralds. I did not sell them. I will not accept a husband's rank as a substitute for proof, and I will not permit anyone to call protection what is only silence purchased at my expense." No one spoke. Arthur stood beside the evidence packet, powerful enough to command the room and disciplined enough not to take her words from her. Felicity turned to Lady Joan. "May I accept your invitation to stay with you?" Lady Joan rose. "You may." "Mrs. Mercer will accompany me." "Naturally." Arthur offered his arm. Felicity looked at it, then at him. The memory of his open palm from the previous day warmed and wounded her at once. Tonight she needed the room to see that she could walk without being carried by a duke's favor. "Not now," she said. Arthur lowered his arm immediately. "As you wish." Felicity crossed the music room alone. At the doorway, she paused beside him and spoke too quietly for the others to hear. "The center emerald is on Lady Hadleigh's brooch." Arthur's eyes moved once toward the pale crescent beneath the candles. When he looked back, the restraint in his face had become resolve. Felicity left Rivenhall's guests standing among the scattered music sheets and unfinished glasses, while behind her the sealed packet remained in Mr. Colfax's hands, and the real emeralds still shone openly on the woman who believed no one could prove they were stolen. By midnight, the last carriage had left Rivenhall Park, carrying with it a dozen versions of Felicity's disgrace. Some guests believed she had sold the emeralds. Others believed the Duke had entered the house in servant's clothing to arrange a secret courtship. By morning, Sir Graham had ensured that both stories were repeated together. Arthur stood in the library with the curtains still drawn against the grey light and listened while Mr. Dawes reported which servants had carried trays through the music-hall which doors had remained open, and which maid had tried to intercept Felicity's letter 2 days earlier. The sealed evidence packet containing the 6 intact paste stones, 2 broken center fragments, original gold chain, and repaired clasp was already in Mr. Colfax's locked case. The real emeralds remained on Lady Hadleigh's brooch. Arthur knew where the evidence was. He did not know how to secure it without warning the woman wearing it. "Lady Hadleigh will move the brooch," he said. "Not while she believes no one can identify the stones," Mr. Dawes replied. "Miss Hadleigh identified the center stone last night." To me, Arthur looked toward the closed library door. "Lady Hadleigh does not know that." Mr. Dawes waited. Arthur had spent years reading fear through movement. A man who believed himself unobserved often revealed more by what he tried to protect than by what he said. Lady Hadleigh would not surrender the brooch voluntarily. If she believed inspection was imminent, she would place it beyond reach. That movement could be followed. It was a sound plan. It was also a plan Felicity had not approved. Arthur thought of her rules in the morning room. No plan using her name without her knowledge and consent. He told himself there was no time to ask. Mr. Sloane had not yet arrived. Sir Graham's gossip was already spreading. By another night, the brooch might be broken apart or carried to London. Have Lady Hadleigh's maid sent to the East Passage on some ordinary errand, Arthur said. "I'll speak with you there as though the matter is private." Mr. Dawes's expression did not change, but his silence carried judgment. "What shall she overhear, Your Grace?" "That Miss Hadleigh recognized the center emerald and intends to demand a public Examination tomorrow morning. Does Miss Hadleigh intend that? Arthur held the butler's gaze. No, Mr. Dawes lowered his eyes. Very good, Your Grace. The decoy required less than 5 minutes. Arthur stood near the east passage window, while Mr. Dawes spoke in a low voice about preparing the morning room for witnesses. Lady Hadleigh's maid entered, carrying folded linen, slowed when she heard Felicity's name, then hurried away without completing the errand. Before luncheon, one of Arthur's men saw Lady Hadleigh cross the upper gallery with a jewel case concealed beneath a shawl. She entered Francis Ludlow's chamber and remained there for 11 minutes. Francis left by the side stair shortly afterward with a reticule held close against her waist. Arthur's man followed her as far as the stable court. He could observe. He could not search a gentlewoman's person without authority, consent, or undeniable cause. Frances did not depart the estate. She returned through another entrance and sent her carriage away empty. The brooch had moved, but not far enough to seize. Arthur should have felt satisfaction. Instead, he remembered Mr. Dawes asking whether Felicity intended the examination. By early afternoon, Felicity knew the rumour had spread beyond Rivenhall. Sir Graham had dictated letters to 3 county households, claiming that his niece had invented an accusation against Lady Hadleigh. After the Duke withdrew his interest, Lady Hadleigh had told callers that Felicity's distress arose from romantic disappointment. Frances had vanished from the drawing-room, and the emerald brooch was no longer pinned to Lady Hadleigh's gown. Felicity found Arthur in the west corridor, speaking with Mr. Dawes. One look at the butler's face told her the conversation had begun before she arrived. "Where is the brooch?" she asked. Arthur dismissed Mr. Dawes with a glance. The butler bowed and left them alone within sight of 2 footmen at the far end of the passage. "Lady Hadleigh gave it to Miss Ludlow," Arthur said. "How do you know?" "One of my men saw the transfer. Why would she move it today?" Arthur did not answer quickly enough. Felicity felt the truth before he spoke. "What did you do?" "I allowed her maid to overhear that you had identified the centre stone and intended to demand an examination tomorrow. The corridor seemed to narrow around her. I intended no such thing. I know, you used my name. The plan forced her to move the evidence. You used my name. Felicity, the brooch is now with Frances. We know its path. That matters. The use of her first name, spoken as though intimacy could soften the violation, struck harder than anger would have done. You promised. I believed delay might cost us the stones. Then you decided your judgment mattered more than my consent. I decided the danger was immediate. The danger was mine." Arthur's face tightened. "I was trying to prevent the brooch from disappearing. And if Lady Hadleigh had panicked enough to destroy it, if she had accused me of trying to steal it, if Frances had fled to London, you placed my name at the centre of a threat without telling me. The evidence moved exactly as I expected." Felicity stared at him. "That is your defence. It is the result. Sir Graham treats me as a marriage piece. Lady Hadleigh dresses me, positions me, and tells me what lie I must speak. You promised to be different, then moved me across your board, because the move was useful." Arthur's expression changed. The words reached him, but not soon enough to repair what he had done. "I did not intend to reduce you. Intent does not restore choice after it has been taken." He began to lift one hand toward her. Felicity stepped back. Arthur stopped at once and let his hand fall. The restraint was right. It was also too late to make the moment gentle. "The plan located the brooch," he said more quietly. "No, Frances is carrying it somewhere in this house, and your man cannot touch her reticule. You located uncertainty and called it success. Arthur had no answer. Felicity reached into her reticule and closed her fingers around the chipped boxwood knight. Its broken edge pressed against her palm, but she did not release it. Our cooperation is ended. Felicity, you will not use my name again. You will not make another arrangement for my protection. You will send any information you possess to Mr. Colfax, and he may decide what is relevant. Where will you go? That is no longer yours to decide. She turned away before grief could weaken the clarity she had fought to keep. Within the hour, she wrote directly to Lady Joan. She did not ask Arthur to carry the letter. She gave it to Mr. Dawes, watched him enter it in the household post book, and requested a messenger wait for the reply. Lady Joan's invitation returned before dusk. Felicity might stay at her residence near St. Albans for as long as she wished. Mrs. Mercer would be received as her companion. Sir Graham objected when the trunks were brought down. You cannot leave while suspicion hangs over you. That is precisely why I must. People will say you fled. People are already saying what you paid them to believe. Lady Hadleigh stood near the staircase without, the emerald brooch. You will return when the Duke tires of this spectacle. Felicity looked at her aunt's bare gown. No, I will return when the truth no longer depends on any of you. On the 19th of May, a closed carriage waited before the side entrance. Mrs. Mercer sat inside with Felicity's personal clothing and letters. The chipped knight remained in Felicity's reticule. The sealed necklace packet remained with Mr. Colfax. Arthur stood several yards from the carriage, bareheaded beneath the pale morning sky. He did not offer his hand. He did not ask her to stay. Felicity placed one foot on the carriage step, then looked back. A good plan can still be a wrong act, she said. Arthur's face held no defense now. I know, not yet. She entered the carriage and closed the door. As the wheels turned toward St. Albans, Frances Ludlow stood behind an upper window with Lady Hadleigh's brooch hidden in her reticule and a new terror taking shape. She had just overheard Sir Graham instructing his wife that, if the jewels were discovered, Miss Ludlow would be named as the thief. Lady Joan's house near St. Albans was smaller than Rivenhall Park, but it possessed something. Felicity had not understood she missed until the first morning there. No door opened without warning, no letter vanished between writing desk and post bag, and no silence was mistaken for consent. On the 20th of May, she sat at a walnut escritoire in the bright back drawing room while Mrs. Mercer sorted ribbons beside the window, and Lady Joan read correspondence near the open door. The chipped boxwood knight rested beside Felicity's inkstand. She had placed it there deliberately, not as a charm, but as a reminder that leaving Rivenhall had not ended the danger of being moved by other people's designs. She addressed a letter to Miss Frances Ludlow in her own hand. She did not accuse Frances of theft. She did not offer pardon she had no authority to give. She wrote that Lady Hadleigh's brooch might contain property belonging to Felicity's maternal trust, that any voluntary statement would be witnessed by Lady Joan and an independent solicitor, and that Frances would be permitted to tell the truth without Sir Graham or Lady Hadleigh in the room. At the bottom, Felicity added one final line. You will receive no promise of immunity from me, but neither will I allow anyone to use your fear as evidence against you. That is kinder than she deserves, Mrs. Mercer said when Felicity sanded the page. It is not kindness. Felicity folded the letter. It is a boundary. I won't purchase truth with a false promise. Lady Joan looked over the top of her correspondence. Excellent. men have conducted half the affairs of Europe by promising what belonged to someone else. Felicity sealed the letter with plain red wax and handed it to Lady Joan's butler for immediate delivery. Only after the door closed did she turn to Mrs. Mercer. "I need you to tell me exactly what you remember about my mother's necklace." Mrs. Mercer set aside the ribbons. Her hands, though lined with age, remained steady. "Your mother showed me the center stone when you were a girl. You thought the mark inside it looked like a new moon." Felicity felt memory rise with painful clarity. Her mother laughing softly beside a candle, a green stone turned between gloved fingers, the pale crescent hidden within. Did anyone else know? Mr. Sloane, certainly. Your father knew. Sir Graham may have heard, though he never cared for jewels unless they could be valued in pounds. And Lady Hadleigh? She watched everything your mother possessed. Mrs. Mercer's mouth tightened. She admired that necklace before she admired your mother. The statement gave motive shape, but not proof. Felicity opened a second sheet of paper and wrote to Mr. Colfax, requesting a certified extract of the marriage settlement inventory, including the description, dimensions, and setting of the 7 emeralds. She asked that the reply come directly to Lady Joan's residence, and that no copy be sent to Rivenhall. By the following afternoon, Mr. Colfax's clerk arrived in person. The certified extract described 6 matched oval emeralds, 1 larger center emerald, containing a pale crescent-shaped inclusion, and a gold necklace with a clasp repaired after the original settlement inventory had been made. The dimensions corresponded closely to the stones Arthur had seen on Lady Hadleigh's brooch, though no final identification could occur without Mr. Sloane's examination. Felicity read the extract twice, then placed it in Lady Joan's locked writing cabinet. She retained the key. It was a small act, but the weight of it in her palm felt like a new language. At 11 o'clock on the 22nd, Arthur paid a formal morning call. Lady Joan received him in the back drawing-room. He wore a dark coat and carried no portfolio, no jewel case, and no expression of easy authority. He bowed first to his aunt, then to Felicity. "Miss Hadleigh." "Your Grace." He did not offer his hand. She was grateful for that. He waited until Lady Joan indicated a chair, then sat across from Felicity with the tea table between them. "I brought copies of every note connected to the decoy," he said. From his inner coat pocket, he withdrew several folded pages and placed them on the table without pushing them toward her. "Mr. Dawes recorded the instruction I gave. My man recorded Lady Hadleigh's movement and Miss Ludlow's route. I have added the time and place of every conversation." Felicity looked at the papers, but did not touch them yet. "Why give them to me?" "Because I used your name without permission. You should possess the full account of what I did. If the notes damage my position as much as they assist yours, that is not a reason to conceal them." His voice held no plea for forgiveness. That mattered. Felicity lifted the papers and examined the first page. Arthur had written the decoy phrase exactly as spoken. He had also recorded that Felicity had neither proposed nor approved it. "You could have edited this," she said. "Yes, you could have omitted Mr. Dawes's question about whether I intended the examination." "Yes, you did not, no." She placed it at the pages beside the certified inventory. "I accept the documents. I do not yet accept your apology." "I understand." Lady Joan rang for tea. When the tray arrived, Arthur reached automatically toward the sugar bowl, then stopped. "You take none." Felicity looked at him. "You remember. You stirred an empty spoon through your tea at Rivenhall when you were trying not to answer Francis." It was precisely the kind of observation that had once made her wary. Now he offered it without using it to direct her. Felicity poured tea into his cup, then her own. She left both unsweetened. "This is not reconciliation," she said, as she handed him the cup. "No." Arthur accepted it carefully. "It is tea." The corner of her mouth moved despite herself. "At least your diplomacy remains useful in small matters. It has rarely achieved anything so valuable." Lady Joan concealed a smile behind her cup. The warmth of the exchange lasted only a moment, but it did not feel false. Arthur did not interpret her courtesy as surrender. He drank the tea and waited for her to lead the conversation. "Sir Graham has been writing to county families," Felicity said. "He claims you withdrew your interest, and I invented the accusation afterward." "I know." "How?" "He came to me this morning before I left Rivenhall." Arthur set down his cup. He offered a bargain. "If I discharge his mortgage arrears and certain London debts, he will issue a statement that the necklace was altered by mistake, and that no blame belongs to you." Felicity stared at him. "He offered to sell my innocence." "Yes, and what did you say?" "That truth purchased from the man who buried it would remain his property." Arthur's gaze held hers. "I refused. Did he threaten?" "You?" "He suggested society would assume I had manufactured evidence to justify marrying you." "And did you tell him there is no engagement?" "I told him your future was not available for negotiation." The words touched something deep, but Felicity did not let feeling outrun judgment. "You are telling me this immediately." "That is what I should have done before the decoy." Silence settled between them. Not an easy silence, but an honest one. Felicity reached for her tea. Arthur did the same. Their hands did not touch. The distance remained, chosen rather than imposed. A knock sounded at the door. Lady Joan's butler entered carrying a folded note on a silver salver. "For Miss Hadleigh, my lady," delivered by Miss Ludlow's maid. Felicity broke the seal. Frances's hand trembled across the page. "I will come under Lady Joan's protection. I possess the brooch. Lady Hadleigh intends to name me as the thief if it is found. I ask only that Sir Graham not be told before I arrive." Felicity read the note aloud. Arthur's expression sharpened, but he did not rise or issue an order. "What do you wish done?" he asked. Felicity folded the message. "Lady Joan, may Frances be received here with Mr. Colfax present?" "She may. Mrs. Mercer will remain in the room." "Naturally." Felicity looked at Arthur. "You may attend only after Frances has entered safely and agreed to your presence." Arthur inclined his head. "As you decide." The butler returned less than an hour later. Behind him stood Frances Ludlow, pale beneath her travelling bonnet, one hand clenched around a dark reticule. She stepped into the drawing room, looked at Felicity, and shut the door behind her. "I have it," she whispered. "The brooch is here." Frances remained just inside the drawing room, one gloved hand locked around the dark reticule. Lady Joan rose. Mrs. Mercer moved closer to Felicity without touching her. Mr. Colfax stood beside the writing table with foolscap, a pen, and an empty document case. No one approached Frances. Felicity had promised her a room without Sir Graham or Lady Hadleigh, not a room without consequences. "You may sit," Felicity said. Frances shook her head. "I'd rather stand. Is His Grace here?" "He is in the adjoining room," Lady Joan said. "He'll enter only if you consent." Frances looked at Felicity. "And Sir Graham doesn't know I've come. Not from anyone in this house." "Then I'll speak." She set the reticule on the table, but kept both hands upon it. "Lady Hadleigh told me the Duke had nearly decided against you. She said a younger woman who understood society might replace you if I helped make your behavior appear unstable." Shame crossed her face. I repeated what she suggested. I asked about the necklace where others could hear. I told people His Grace had met you secretly while dressed as a servant. Felicity did not soften the truth. You knew that would injure me. Yes, I thought it would help me. Frances swallowed. Now I know they meant to ruin whichever woman became inconvenient. She opened the reticule. Inside lay a small jewel case of dark green Morocco leather. After the Duke's conversation was overheard, Lady Hadleigh came to my chamber. She said you had identified the center stone and intended to demand an examination. She gave me this and ordered me to carry it out of Rivenhall. Mr. Colfax dipped his pen. Did she describe the contents? She called it her emerald brooch. She said I was to keep it hidden until Sir Graham sent instructions. Did you open the case? Once. I saw 7 stones. Frances lifted the case but did not pass it across the table. Later, I heard Sir Graham tell Lady Hadleigh that if anyone found the brooch, they would say I stole it. He said, my ambition would make the story believable. Her fingers trembled. I believed them when they called you desperate. I didn't understand. They had already prepared the same word for me. Felicity felt no affection for her. But she understood the terror of discovering that obedience had never purchased safety. You may surrender the case voluntarily, she said. Mr. Colfax will record every transfer. No one will search you or take it by force. Frances looked at the solicitor. And if the stones are stolen property? Your voluntary surrender and full statement will be recorded, he replied. I can't promise what no honest solicitor should promise, but concealment won't improve your position. Frances closed her eyes for one breath. Then she placed the case in Lady Joan's hands. I give it freely. Lady Joan did not open it. She placed it before Mr. Colfax. He wrote as he spoke. Emerald spray brooch, formerly in Lady Hadleigh's possession, transferred by her to Miss Frances Ludlow, voluntarily surrendered by Miss Ludlow to Lady Joan Beresford, then delivered unopened to my custody. He looked at each woman. Do you confirm that sequence? They did. He wrapped the case in clean paper, tied it with narrow tape, and applied his professional seal. Lady Joan and Frances signed the custody note. Felicity signed as witness. Mrs. Mercer added her name. Only when the packet lay secured inside Mr. Colfax's document case did Frances release her breath. I'll sign a full statement, she said, and I'll retract what I told the guests. Publicly, Felicity said. Frances flinched, then nodded. Publicly. Felicity studied her. Truth won't restore trust at once. I know, but it will stop the lie from growing. Frances lowered her gaze. That is more mercy than I gave you. It is not mercy, Felicity said. It is order. Lady Joan crossed to the adjoining door. Miss Ludlow, will you permit my nephew to enter? Frances nodded. Arthur came in without haste. His gaze went first to Felicity, then to the sealed case, and finally to Frances. No one from Rivenhall will remove you without your consent, he said. Thank you. Mr. Colfax escorted Frances to a separate sitting room, where her formal statement could be prepared with Lady Joan present. Mrs. Mercer went with them. Felicity remained beside the window. Arthur did not come closer until the door had shut and Lady Joan's maid had taken a chair within sight in the corridor. May I speak with you? He asked. You may. He stopped several feet away. I used your name without your consent. I created a danger you had not chosen. I valued the success of my plan above the boundary you had stated clearly. He did not look away. I won't call it protection. It was arrogance made respectable by a useful result. Felicity had prepared herself for explanation. The absence of one left nowhere for her anger to strike except the truth. "I have given you every note connected to the decoy," Arthur continued. "I will make no further move unless you ask it. If you abandon the inquiry, I'll support that decision. If you continue without me, I'll obey it. Obedience for one afternoon is not change. No, forgiveness requires changed action after the apology becomes inconvenient. Then, judge me by what follows." Felicity looked toward the sealed case. "Sir Graham will attack Francis's credibility. Lady Hadleigh will say the brooch was a gift, or that the stones merely resemble my mother's. Mr. Sloane can answer the second claim. Only if the comparison occurs before the same social circle that heard the accusation." Arthur's attention sharpened, but he remained silent. Felicity crossed to the table and placed one finger on the custody record. "We will return to Rivenhall. The examination will take place in the orangery, in daylight. The guests from the musicale will be invited. Mr. Colfax will control the objects. Mr. Sloane will explain the stones. Frances will speak for herself. And Sir Graham? He will answer after the evidence is shown." Arthur nodded. "What do you require of me? You will speak first." He understood. About the livery, the listening, and the decoy. "No one will believe this is justice if your own deception is hidden behind your rank." "Agreed. You will not announce an engagement, offer marriage, or imply that my innocence rests upon your judgment." "Agreed. And you will not alter the order because you believe the room is turning against us." Arthur held her gaze. "I give you my word." The answer did not erase what had happened, but it sounded like discipline accepted before proof of reward. Felicity felt the tension in her shoulders shift. Arthur saw it and remained where he was. "Is there anything else?" he asked. She had thought there would be. Instead, she became aware of how tired she was and how long she had carried fear without allowing another person near it. Felicity crossed the space between them. Arthur's breath changed, but he did not reach for her. "Do you want me to hold you?" he asked. "Yes." His arms came around her carefully. Felicity rested her cheek against his coat and returned the embrace with both arms, not as surrender and not as forgiveness completed, but as comfort freely chosen. He did not kiss her. He did not speak over the quiet. When she stepped back, he released her at once. A carriage sounded on the gravel outside. Lady Joan's butler entered moments later, carrying a card. "Mr. Elias Sloane has arrived from London, my lady. He has brought his old work order and his jeweller's instruments." Mr. Elias Sloane entered Lady Joan's drawing room, carrying a narrow mahogany case in one hand and a leather portfolio beneath the other arm. He was a compact man with silver at his temples, careful eyes, and the patient manner of someone accustomed to being asked whether memory could survive 20 years of fashion. Mr. Colfax rose to greet him. Lady Joan remained near the open door, while Mrs. Mercer sat beside Frances, whose face had not regained its colour since surrendering the brooch. Arthur stood near the window. Felicity occupied the chair nearest the central table, not because rank had placed her there, but because she had chosen the position from which every object and every witness could be seen. "Before anything is opened," Mr. Colfax said, "we will record the condition of both packets." He placed his locked document case on the table and removed the sealed packet from the musicale. The red wax bore his professional mark, with Felicity's, Lady Joan's, Mr. Dawes's, and Sir Graham's signatures written across the folded edge. The seal remained unbroken. He then removed the paper-wrapped brooch case surrendered by Frances. Its tape and wax were likewise intact. Mr. Sloane examined both without touching the seals. I confirm that neither packet appears disturbed. Mr. Colfax recorded the statement. Felicity watched every word enter the page. Only when each witness had agreed did the solicitor break the first seal. He unfolded the velvet over the table. 6 green paste stones lay within, together with 2 fragments from the broken center stone, the original gold chain, and the repaired clasp. The fragments did not fit perfectly until Mr. Sloane adjusted their angle with slender silver tweezers. Then they formed the shape Felicity had seen at her throat. Paste, he said. All 7 replacements were paste. The center imitation has fractured cleanly enough to show the material. He lifted the clasp beneath a small magnifying lens. This repair is mine. I replaced the damaged tongue after the chain caught on a shawl. Miss Hadleigh was present at the original repair. Felicity felt the room tighten around the confirmation. I was 14. Yes, miss. You objected to waiting 3 days because your mother wished to wear the necklace at a dinner. A memory surfaced, her mother laughing when Felicity had declared that no dinner deserved 3 days of patience. The detail was too ordinary to have been invented for advantage. Mr. Sloane set the clasp down. Mr. Colfax opened the second sealed packet and placed the dark green jewel case before the goldsmith. When the lid lifted, 7 emeralds gleamed against cream velvet. No candlelight softened them now. Daylight from the tall windows entered the stones and returned in deep green flashes. Felicity's breath caught. The center emerald held the pale crescent within it, unmistakable beneath the lens. Mr. Sloane measured each stone, consulted the certified settlement inventory, and compared the reverse of every setting. He worked slowly. No one interrupted. At last, he turned the brooch toward Felicity. These emeralds correspond in number, size, and individual character to the stones described in Lady Thomas Hadleigh's necklace. He indicated the center stone. The crescent inclusion is distinctive. It cannot be added by a setter. It formed within the stone. Then he adjusted the lens over the gold beneath one oval emerald. There are old setting marks here. Each stone was removed from a previous mount. The scars correspond to narrow claw settings of the kind used in the original necklace. Sir Graham's defense, though he was not present to speak it, seemed to weaken in the daylight. Yet Felicity remembered the rule she had made. Resemblance was not enough. "Can you prove who brought them to you?" she asked. Mr. Sloane opened his leather portfolio. "I brought the original work order. The sheet was dated 6 months earlier. It recorded 7 family emeralds delivered by Lady Hadleigh for resetting into a fashionable spray brooch. The payment had been made by personal draft in Sir Graham Hadleigh's name. The work order did not identify the stones as Felicity's. The settlement inventory did not show who had removed them. The marks did not reveal motive. Together, however, the pieces formed a chain no single statement could safely dismiss. Mr. Colfax read the relevant lines aloud and compared the measurements. The trust inventory establishes ownership. Mr. Sloane's work order establishes possession and alteration. The physical marks connect the stones to the original setting. Sir Graham's draft connects him to the transaction. Arthur's gaze moved to Felicity. He did not speak for her. "Then we have proof," Lady Joan said. "We have evidence," Felicity replied. "Proof becomes complete when those responsible are required to answer it." Mr. Sloane nodded with grave approval. The stones were returned to the brooch case. The paste fragments, 6 intact imitations, original chain, and repaired clasp were returned to their velvet packet. Mr. Colfax resealed both before the witnesses and recorded the new wax marks. The centre-paste stone remained in 2 pieces. Nothing had been repaired, exchanged, or removed. Frances then moved to the writing table. Her statement had been prepared from her account of Lady Hadleigh's promises, the transfer of the brooch, and Sir Graham's intention to accuse her if the jewels were discovered. Mr. Colfax read each sentence aloud. "Do you give this statement voluntarily?" "I do. Has anyone promised you immunity?" "No." "Has anyone instructed you to accuse Sir Graham or Lady Hadleigh falsely?" "No." Frances signed. Lady Joan and Mr. Colfax witnessed her name. Felicity watched without offering comfort that might be mistaken for pressure. Frances set down the pen. "Will I have to speak at Rivenhall?" "Yes," Felicity said. "The people who heard the lie must hear the correction from you." Frances swallowed. "Then I'll speak." When the documents had been secured, Felicity arranged 6 small cards on the table. "Tomorrow's reckoning will follow this order. His Grace speaks first about the disguise and the decoy. I speak second. Mr. Sloane conducts the physical comparison. Mr. Colfax presents the work order and settlement inventory. Frances gives her statement. Sir Graham answers last." Arthur looked at the cards. "You have left him no opportunity to interrupt before the chain is visible. I have left him every opportunity to answer after the facts exist in the room. And if he refuses to attend, then his absence will be recorded beside the invitation." Mr. Colfax inclined his head. "I will see that notice is delivered with witnesses." By the evening of the 26th, every invitation had been acknowledged. Sir Graham and Lady Hadleigh would attend. So would the principal guests from the musicale. The sealed objects remained in Mr. Colfax's locked case. Mr. Sloane's original work order remained in his portfolio. A certified copy would be made only after the public examination. Frances's signed statement remained with the solicitor. Nothing depended upon memory alone now. After supper, Felicity stood in the smaller drawing room while Lady Joan wrote letters at a desk near the open adjoining door. Arthur approached, but stopped beyond arm's reach. "May I ask you something that has nothing to do with tomorrow's evidence?" "You may ask." "When this is finished, may I court you?" The question entered the quiet without rank or pressure. Felicity studied him. "Not because you defended me, no. Not because society expects you to repair a scandal, no. And not because you believe marriage will prove your judgment correct, no." Arthur's voice softened. "Because I admire your mind. Because I have watched you refuse cruelty when obedience would have been easier. Because being near you has made me wish to become more honest than I have been." Felicity felt warmth rise beneath the steadiness she fought to keep. "You may court me if you continue telling the truth when the truth reduces your authority." "I will try. That is more honest than a perfect promise." His mouth curved. "I am learning my audience." Silence followed, but it no longer felt defensive. Arthur's gaze lowered briefly to her lips, then returned to her eyes. "May I kiss you?" Felicity could have stepped back. He would have let her. Instead, she lifted one hand and touched his face. The line of his cheek was warm beneath her palm. "Yes." Arthur bent slowly, giving her time to change her mind. His lips met hers with tenderness rather than possession. The kiss was brief, but not uncertain. Felicity rose slightly toward him and returned it, choosing the closeness as clearly as she had chosen every condition before it. When they parted, her hand remained against his cheek. Arthur did not cover it or trap it there. "There are words I want to say," he murmured. "Then why don't you?" "Because tomorrow your innocence must stand without them." Felicity held his gaze. "Then wait, I will." At sunrise the next morning, Mr. Dyer carried Arthur's folded servant livery from the locked travelling trunk and laid it across his arms. Beyond Lady Joan's windows, the carriages were already being brought around for Rivenhall. The orangery at Rivenhall Park had been arranged for beauty so often that no one present was prepared for it to become a place of judgment. Morning light poured through the long glass panes and fell across the central table, where a length of white velvet had been spread beneath the sealed evidence packets. The principal guests from the music-hall stood in a wide half-circle among the citrus trees. Lady Joan sat near Felicity, Mrs. Mercer beside her. Francis Ludlow stood pale but upright behind Mr. Colfax. Mr. Sloane waited with his instruments and leather portfolio. Sir Graham and Lady Hadleigh had arrived together, dressed with the rigid elegance of people determined to make guilt resemble dignity. Arthur entered last. Mr. Dyer followed, carrying the folded servant livery. A murmur moved through the room when Arthur took the plain coat and placed it over the back of an empty household chair. He did not stand beside Felicity. He stood alone before the witnesses. "Before anyone is asked to judge Sir Graham or Lady Hadleigh," he said, "you will hear what I did." The room quieted. Arthur's gaze moved over the same faces that had watched the necklace fall. "I entered Rivenhall Park under the name Mr. Reed and wore a servant's livery. Miss Hadleigh did not know my identity. I listened to a private conversation without her consent because I suspected she was being presented to me through a rehearsed account." Sir Graham shifted, but Arthur continued. "Later, after promising Miss Hadleigh that I would not use her name in any plan without permission, I deliberately allowed Lady Hadleigh's maid to overhear that Miss Hadleigh intended to demand an examination of the emerald brooch. Miss Hadleigh had made no such decision. I used her name as bait because I believed the result would justify the method." He looked directly at Felicity. "It did not. My rank excuses none of it." No one applauded. Felicity had not wanted applause. She wanted the truth to exist before the room was invited to condemn anyone else. Arthur stepped back. Felicity rose. Her hands were cold, but the chipped boxwood knight rested in her reticule, still in her possession, still broken, still her own. "On the 12th of May, she said. "Sir Graham and Lady Hadleigh ordered me to wear my mother's necklace and say that she had sold the original emeralds before her death. They told me the stones then, in the necklace, were paste. Sir Graham said the Duke's marriage settlement would conceal a deficiency in my maternal trust before an independent solicitor examined the accounts. When I refused, he threatened to accuse me of replacing the stones and to dismiss Mrs. Mercer without a reference." Lady Hadleigh gave a brittle laugh. "This is absurd. A distressed woman can remember any threat she wishes." "Then let us leave memory and turn to objects," Felicity said. Mr. Colfax came forward. He displayed the first packet, its seals and signatures intact. He named each witness to the previous sealing, then broke the wax and unfolded the velvet. 6 intact green paste stones lay beside 2 fragments from the broken center imitation. The original gold chain and repaired clasp rested beneath them. "These are the same objects collected from the floor of the music room," he said. "The center imitation remains broken in 2 pieces. Nothing has been removed or replaced." Mr. Sloane examined the chain and clasp under his lens. "The clasp repair is mine. I performed it when Miss Hadleigh was 14. He touched the paste stones only with silver tweezers. These 7 replacements are not emeralds." Mr. Colfax opened the second sealed packet. The dark green Morocco case appeared, followed by the spray brooch. Under the white daylight, the 7 emeralds held a depth the imitations had never possessed. Mr. Sloane measured each stone and compared the figures to the certified settlement inventory. Then he brought the center emerald beneath his lens. This stone contains a pale crescent-shaped inclusion within the crystal. It is natural and distinctive. Mrs. Mercer stood. Lady Thomas Hadleigh showed me that mark when Miss Felicity was a child. She called it the little moon in the stone. Mr. Sloane turned the brooch and indicated the reverse of the settings. Each emerald bears old marks from narrower claw mounts. Those marks correspond to the original necklace setting. He opened his portfolio. My work order records that Lady Hadleigh delivered 7 family emeralds to my London shop 6 months ago and commissioned their resetting into this brooch. Payment was made by Sir Graham Hadleigh's personal draft. Mr. Colfax placed the certified inventory beside it. The settlement inventory establishes that 7 emeralds matching these dimensions formed part of the late Lady Thomas Hadleigh's separate property, held in trust for Miss Felicity Hadleigh. The work order establishes who delivered the stones for alteration. The payment draft connects Sir Graham to that alteration. Sir Graham's face had gone grey. A trustee may authorize repair. A trustee may preserve trust property, Mr. Colfax replied. He may not convert it for private use, conceal the conversion, or employ the beneficiary's proposed marriage settlement to replace missing funds. Lady Hadleigh lifted her chin. The brooch was meant to remain within the family. Frances stepped forward before Felicity could answer. Her signed statement remained in Mr. Colfax's custody, but she spoke from memory. You gave it to me after hearing that Miss Hadleigh intended an examination. You ordered me to carry it away. Later, I heard Sir Graham tell you that if it was found, I would be named as the thief. Lady Hadleigh turned on her. You ungrateful little fool. Frances flinched but did not retreat. I repeated lies about Miss Hadleigh because you promised to support me as the Duke's alternative bride. I retract them. His Grace's disguise was his choice. Miss Hadleigh did not know his identity, and she did not sell the emeralds. Sir Graham struck the head of his cane once against the floor. This entire performance has been arranged by Calderbrook. No, Felicity said. The order of evidence was arranged by me. She faced her uncle. Did you use income from my maternal trust to meet Rivenhall's mortgage arrears? His silence lengthened. Mr. Colfax opened a separate accounting note. Preliminary entries show transfers into Sir Graham's private estate account and payments connected to Lady Hadleigh's London expenses. Sir Graham looked toward the assembled county guests and understood that denial would now require him to call the documents false, the goldsmith corrupt, Frances perjured, Mrs. Mercer confused, and every visible stone a coincidence. The estate required support, he said at last, temporary support. From property that was not yours, Felicity replied. The marriage settlement would have replaced it, Lady Hadleigh said. The admission left the room utterly still. Once Miss Hadleigh became Duchess, no one would have cared about an old necklace. Felicity looked at the woman who had fastened paste around her throat and called it family duty. I cared. She turned to Mr. Colfax. I require a written correction sent to every household that received the accusation. I require an independent accounting of the trust, return of the emeralds, security for Mrs. Mercer, and an end to Sir Graham's authority over my property. Mr. Colfax placed a prepared undertaking on the table. Sir Graham may sign that he will not exercise any trust power pending execution of a deed of retirement. If he refuses, I am instructed to seek relief in Chancery." Sir Graham read the document. The room watched him sign. Dual custody remained with Mr. Colfax until legal release. Sir Graham agreed to execute the retirement deed and withdrew from the county subscription committee. Mr. Colfax stated that the evidence concerning his conduct as a magistrate would be sent to the Lord Lieutenant. Lady Hadleigh's invitations and patronage were not matters of law, but the women who had once courted her favour no longer met her eyes. She would leave Rivenhall before nightfall. Frances made her public retraction, though Felicity offered no immediate friendship in return. When it was done, Felicity stood before the guests, without an engagement, without the emeralds around her neck, and without a duke speaking in her place. Her name had been restored before any title could absorb it. After the witnesses departed, she entered the narrow passage beyond the orangery. Lady Joan remained visible through the open glass door. Arthur waited there, no longer in livery, no longer hidden behind strategy. "There were words you chose not to say yesterday," Felicity said. "There are." He held her gaze. "I love you, Felicity, not as a promise to be arranged, nor as a peace to be moved. I love your mind, your courage, and the truth you demand from me, even when it costs me comfort." Her breath caught, but she did not look away. "I love you, Arthur, but you must never choose my move for me again. I won't promise perfection." His voice was low and steady. "I promise honesty and the discipline to ask before I act where your life is concerned." Felicity placed her hand in his. He closed his fingers only after hers had settled. Then she rose toward him and kissed him first. Arthur answered with tenderness, never taking more than she offered. When they parted, she remained close enough for their joined hands to rest between them. "Court me honestly," she said. "Then ask me when neither scandal nor gratitude is in the room. I will." Behind them, the white velvet still held the sealed fragments of the false center stone, broken and unchanged, while the real emeralds waited under independent custody to be returned to the woman, whose truth had survived every attempt to replace it. From the 28th of May onward, Arthur courted Felicity with a patience that no one at Rivenhall had thought him capable of possessing. He called at Lady Joan's residence at proper hours. He wrote letters that contained no instructions disguised as concern. He drove Felicity in an open carriage with Lady Joan or Mrs. Mercer seated opposite, and when a subject belonged to her, he asked before offering an opinion. The change did not make him meek, it made him attentive. He still argued, laughed dryly, and noticed more than most people wished him to notice. But he no longer treated perception as permission. Felicity learned that he disliked overcooked asparagus, rose before dawn when anxious, and read parliamentary papers as though they had personally offended him. Arthur learned that she preferred rain to heat, disliked being praised for endurance, and sometimes placed the chipped boxwood knight outside the chessboard when she needed to think without being watched. During one June drive, Arthur asked whether she wished to return to Rivenhall before the accounting was complete. Felicity said no. He did not arrange the visit anyway. A week later, when she chose to inspect the house with Mr. Colfax and Mrs. Mercer, Arthur accompanied them only after she invited him. That quiet obedience to a boundary repaired more than any grand gesture could have done. Their courtship did not proceed without disagreement. In July, Mr. Sloane wrote that the 7 emeralds could be removed from Lady Hadleigh's spray brooch and restored to the original gold chain once Mr. Colfax issued written authority. Arthur believed the stones should be placed in a new setting, untouched by the fraud. Felicity disagreed. "The necklace belonged to my mother before it belonged to their crime," she said. "I won't surrender its history to them." Arthur stood beside the window, visibly unconvinced. A new setting would be safer. Safer isn't always truer. He turned back to her. The old instinct to arrange the outcome passed across his face. Then he stopped. "You asked for my opinion. You have it. And the decision is yours." Felicity looked at him for a long moment. "Then I choose restoration." Arthur inclined his head. "Mr. Sloane will receive that instruction from you." The ordinary disagreement mattered more than many dramatic promises. He had not become perfect. He had chosen not to overrule her when the matter touched both memory and risk. By early August, the legal consequences had moved beyond the orangery. Sir Graham executed a deed of retirement from the trust. A replacement trustee was appointed under the settlement provisions, and Mr. Colfax completed an independent accounting of the missing income. Sir Graham sold unentailed horses, surrendered his interest in a London lease, and moved to a smaller house beyond the county. The Lord Lieutenant received the evidence concerning his conduct as a magistrate. Invitations ceased before any formal decision did. Lady Hadleigh went to Bath to live with a widowed sister, whose hospitality was said to be dutiful rather than warm. Francis sent signed corrections to every household that had received the accusation. Some women acknowledged the letters, others did not. Felicity neither obstructed Francis's future nor pretended trust had been restored. Mrs. Mercer received an independent provision secured through the corrected trust accounts. And for the first time in many years, no one could threaten her livelihood to control Felicity. Mr. Sloane retained his original work order. Mr. Colfax kept the certified copy. Francis's statement, Arthur's decoy notes, and the sealed paste evidence in the trust file. The 6 intact imitation stones and the 2 broken center fragments remained exactly as they had been after the musicale. They were not repaired, replaced, or displayed. Once written legal authority was complete. Mr. Colfax released the original gold chain and the emerald brooch to Mr. Sloane. The goldsmith removed the 7 real emeralds from the sprays setting and remounted them in the necklace according to the old arrangement. The pale crescent returned to the center. Mr. Dyer returned the servant livery to Arthur's locked travelling trunk after the reckoning, and later to a cedar press at Calderbrook. Arthur neither destroyed it nor displayed it as a trophy. On the 16th of August, Arthur came to Lady Joan's house for a chess game. No guests had been invited. Lady Joan sat in the adjoining room with the door open, close enough for propriety and far enough for honesty. Felicity played with the chipped knight among the proper pieces. Arthur made no attempt to advise her. When she captured his bishop, he studied the board and said, "I'm beginning to suspect you've been concealing a ruthless nature. You arrived in servant's clothing to investigate me. You've no grounds to object to concealed strategy." "That's a fair judgment." He made his move, then did not remove his hand from the edge of the table. "Felicity, when there's no scandal, no gratitude, no audience, and no need for you to accept anything from me, do you choose me?" She met his eyes. There was no jewel case before him, and no speech prepared for witnesses. Only the man who had deceived her, failed her, answered for it, and learned that love did not grant authority over another life. "Yes," she said, "I choose you." Arthur's breath left slowly. "Then will you marry me?" "I will." He reached across the chessboard, but stopped before touching her. Felicity gave him her hand. He bent over it, not as a duke receiving obedience, but as a man receiving a freely made promise. Their marriage settlement preserved Felicity's maternal property, guaranteed an independent allowance, and protected her personal correspondence and effects. The banns were read on 3 successive Sundays. On the 11th of September, Felicity married Arthur in the parish church with Lady Joan and Mrs. Mercer near the front, and no emeralds required to prove her worth. She wore the restored necklace because she had chosen to wear it. The centre stone's pale crescent rested above her heart. After the wedding breakfast, she and Arthur began the 2-day journey to Calderbrook Chase, changing horses along the road and stopping overnight before continuing into Derbyshire. The household received them with ceremony. But Felicity's life there was not decided in a single arrival. Several weeks later, on a cool afternoon in early October, she sat with Arthur on the south terrace above the autumn lawns. A chessboard stood between them. The chipped boxwood knight remained hers, unrepaired and upright, near the edge of the board. Arthur had made his move. He waited. "You're staring at the knight," Felicity said. "I'm resisting the temptation to suggest its future." "How heroic! I've faced easier disciplines." She advanced the knight toward the center. Arthur looked at the piece, then at her. "I love you." The words were no longer a declaration made in the shadow of accusation. They belonged to ordinary life. Felicity placed her hand over his. "I know, and I love you enough to expect you to keep learning." A demanding marriage. "You were warned." His fingers turned beneath hers, holding without closing too tightly. "May I kiss you?" Felicity rose, crossed the small distance, and answered by drawing him toward her. The kiss was warm, chosen, and unhurried. When they parted, Arthur kept her hand in his, while the chipped knight stood upright near the center of the board. He waited for her next move, and Felicity smiled, because at last the waiting was not uncertainty. It was love.